Sitting up with the dead. Uncle Bud had died. He was in the back sleeping porch of the big house, and he had used a knife to try to remove the cancer that was killing him. Been sick for months back there, laying in that bed, and just had the energy left to get his knife and jab into his side. And he tried to cut into himself, and when he got down to the cancer cell, he hit it and jabbed it with the knife again, and it was the last thing he ever did. When he get into that cancer cell, and that cancer cell hit the air, everyone had to leave the room. It smelled like the devil. And one of the aunts, Adele, she vomited instantly, and Aunt Essopie ran out after the Bible, crying hysterically, because the room had seemed to darken with the evil that was released from that cancer cell. Uncle Bud sat up quickly, fallen, from under the spell of all that whiskey he had drank. He was vaguely able to form a few last words. He said, "Death head," and then fainter, "Death head." And then he died, and he was dead. Right there, it was quiet. We all knew that Uncle Bud was referring to the bare oak tree in his front yard. It had craggly branches and reminded most people of death. It always had. It had been a dead tree since about the end of the Civil War, when it was struck by lightning, killing the widow Nettie Jane Slump, who had climbed its lower branches, waiting in vain for her husband to appear down at the far curve of the dirt road. She'd come out every evening. She had her babies in the house, and she'd lock them up and walk outside and climb that tree and just wait to see if she'd see her husband walking around that curve down there, that road. She'd heard that the war had been lost and the survivors would be headed home. She knew Eldridge would come home that way. Surely he would. She didn't realize that he had been killed by backwoods laudanum fiends, drained of blood, just a day's walk away from the Death Head. It had been called the Death Head because it grew out of an old Indian mound. Bud and all them lived in that house on that old Indian mound. Their great-great-great-grandparents, I believe, is the ones had leveled it out, built the house. The roots of that tree, it never looked like it was alive, were all around the house. They had grown out underneath everything. Who knows how many dead Indians were under there. We all stayed away from that tree because it really was the scariest damn thing you could see. It looked like something out of a horror movie. Well, anyway, it walked around. Them roots came down under that house, around the side of a root cellar off the side of the house. Now that root cellar wasn't only home to just a huge collection of jars and preserves and vegetables and dried meat. Just about everything you could get out of the garden would be put up and preserved and put down in that root cellar. There were also a couple 50-pound bags of DDT. We had that stored down there because they'd made it illegal, but there really wasn't nothing better for killing skeeters and bugs around the house. You just reach in and get you a little of that DDT, and you could sprinkle that around, and it took care of just about everything, even the roaches. Sometimes if you were down there, and we used to get punished and get sat down there and locked in the root cellar. You'd be down in that root cellar and it's quiet, and sometimes almost like you could hear something crying. Especially the low hours of the night, you might be down there and just feels like you're hearing somebody crying. Maybe it was Nettie, Nettie who had died sitting in those branches of the Death Head, dead just days after her Eldridge was skint and drained of blood by them laudanum opium fiends on his way home from the war. Nettie had been sitting up in that tree when it was struck by lightning on that clear night. Clear, backlit clouds and light of the moon. No storm, nothing. Just a bolt of lightning, round and white as a hay trailer. White flash of an electrical surge come down out of the sky. And we were younger. Uncle Bud didn't like us to play in the yard at all. We'd been shooting pellet guns at the windows of an old bus that was laid over in the creek down near the trash gulch. The bus had been full of electronics and antique phone equipment. Some of the electronics back from that Air Force base that had closed down, and a lot of the phones were from the local exchange down in Thomasville when they had updated them. Sometime in the late 60s, they'd taken them out, and there we were in the mid-70s, shooting out the windows because we had nothing else to do. We'd wandered over to Bud's to see if we could sneak into the Root Cellar and steal a jar of pickles and a jar of pickled jalapenos. But Bud saw us. He saw us crawling under the barbed wire fence to the side of the pasture. "Yay! Hey!" he called out. "You boys, come here." "Hey, Uncle Bud," we said. He was slowly whittling on a piece of hickory. He seemed to be making a spear or something. He looked up at us, motioning to us with a knife. He said, "How would you like it if I cut your balls off?" "No," we said, backing up. Bud rose from his seat, dropping the stick. "Chatty boy, I'm going to cut your balls off, so help me God. Come here, you little..." I ran so hard. Phil was running behind me. We knew Bud was crazy. What we didn't know was why. After he died, we'd learned about the gold. Bud had found a lot of gold he'd always claimed he had in the hill of the old pasture. He had buried it somewhere in his yard. That night after he died, we heard some of the older folks talking about Bud, talking about how crazy he had been, and mentioning the gold and how they all thought he had buried it under the death head. It was getting later, and me and Phil were made to sit up with Bud's body until the funeral man could come get it in the morning. Uncle Claude was in there until about 10. We were trying to keep it light and joke around, We had the TV on for noise and some connection to the outside world. It didn't come in all that well back then, but we could pick up WALA out of Mobile with just enough of a picture to see what was going on. Through the snow, we could hear and somewhat see The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And we had that on and some other stuff that came on afterwards, and must have been around 2 a.m. when things got weird. The TV had signed off for the night, and we just left it turned on, turned the volume down, and have some light in the room. There was a CB base station on the table behind the gun rack, and it had started to hit on channel 6 as it scanned for life out there. It would scan and occasionally land on something worth hearing, something interesting, or someone just fooling around. We heard a weird squelch on the CB base unit's monitor, and then we noticed that every time this squelch would occur, the static pattern on the TV was disturbed at about the same time. It was like they were commingling somehow, and every few minutes something was trying to come through. This was the first time Phil and I ever had to sit up with the dead. And I suppose everyone else was just worn out from the day and thought it would be best to leave these young people up there sitting up, and we were just trying to stay awake. So there we were, wide awake. Dead Uncle Bud behind us, laying on an inflatable mattress, and covered in a white sheet. Light of the TV on behind us. And about this time, we turned that Pong machine back on for another match. And at this point, it was just going to be a battle against sleep. We knew we'd get a good lick in the Will-O-Switch. A Will-O-Switch that we ourselves would be made to go find. That and no TV, no Kool-Aid, nothing. If we were found asleep in there, so. I was up about 2-1, making my way through that third game when the CB let out just a horrible noise and the TV screen got real dark, almost as if it were in pain or something. The noise got slightly more intense before the TV, the CB, everything went dark. The power was out, and it was like Uncle Bud let out a groan, and that was all it took for us to scream, and we did scream. I found myself walking on a train track. My foot was hurt, and slightly in front of me was a Union soldier. Then we were sitting by a fire. Then we were sharing some beef jerky. "What are you going to do when you get home?" he asked. It was like I was watching this from a separate body. Suddenly I was suspended above them, shifting perspective from one to the other as they spoke. Him, Eldridge, on his way home from the war. He had met up with a Union soldier and traveled together for a week or so before they parted up, with Eldridge heading towards Grove Hill and the Union soldier going on his way up further north. Somehow I knew all this, that the Union soldier name was Reginald. He said, I hate to ask, but I'm damn near starving. You got any money, Eld?" Eld said, "Well, if we can find somewhere to spend it, we'll be in luck. I happen to have been paid just before the end." And Eldridge proudly unwrapped a pile of money, which set Reginald off to a fit of mad laughter. "You don't know, do you?" he laughed. "That money ain't worth the paper it's printed on." They sat in silence, muffled with a little defeated laughter, before they finally just came around to saying, "I guess we're just going to be gnawing on this hard jerky for a while." I was alone, walking, then slightly above Eldridge, watching him walk. Down a dirt road. It didn't look that it was too far away, maybe a day or so, but it was definitely looked to be within Clark County from just the look of the trees and the road. About 4 skinny figures, nude except for the mud and the straw caked around their twisted bodies. They came at me fast. I knew instantly that he was about to die. I was now him, and now I was about to die. Fueled by evil, these laudanum junkies were coming at me with hunger in their eyes. They had all turned to cannibalism. This was known. They were a danger out on the road. They're feared by everyone except for a few medicine women that had power over them. They lived on human flesh and the adrenal glands of wild boar, and adrenal glands that they could cut out of and steal from hogs, leaving dozens of dead carcasses to greet a farmer when he woke up, More dead hogs, slaughtered in a drug-fueled madness. Meat wasted for the pursuit of the wild rush of the methamphetamine-like charge of the beast's glands. They were known as laudanum zombies, or sometimes opium addicts, but mostly they were known as a quick way to die when traveling alone. Eldridge was consumed and mutilated. His insides decorated the gravel road, hanging entrails from tree to tree. His limbs hanging, blood drank. He served no further purpose to this monstrous tribe of cranked-up laudanum junkies. I was now inside the head of one of the zombies, my mouth dripping blood, and my mind raged with electric energy. I was ripped to the wall with power. My vision seemed hyper-real. I could see the entrails of the lone victim, now forming a psychic barrier around my camp. I knew the witch down by Dirt Creek wouldn't be powerless. She wouldn't have nothing over me now. She'd be powerless over me for at least a week, till the last parts of Eldridge had been eaten or by rot or scavenged away by dozens of little teeth, the death, decay of nature. My mind became a blue surge of white, hot light. I was Eldridge. I was sitting by the side of the road. I was whole again. My mind wanting to be home. I became pure energy. I ripped up into the sky, bursting, then down, faster, almost instantly I hit the death head. I was pure energy, pure evil. I ripped through the wood like some sort of devil, exploding through every fiber. I tore through Nettie Jane's slump, exploding within her. I lit her up like a lantern. Time had stopped, or nearly slowed to a standstill, as I tore through Nettie Jane's slump, splitting her open. I converted Nettie Jane's flesh into a glowing substance, enveloping her body, just a glowing sack of fat, blood, bones, and flesh. I became one with her as my electric charge in her human body, her soul twisting around my electric wrath like a tornado of opposite currents drawn together. I heard a sound like growing thunder, and then time accelerated, leaving only the silent emptiness. Dead. Still. I found myself, me this time, sitting on the floor of the Root Cellar. Life and existence only flashed in instances and moments, still images, still life. Moments out of time, out of order, people and smells and fragrance. Fragments of time. I tried to touch them. I tried to reach to them, and occasionally I could knock over a glass or close a door, but then the scene would change, and like a breeze, I would be gone or somewhere else. It was all pieces and disconnected. A few minutes later, I was back in the room, sitting up with dead Uncle Bud. There was, sitting there, just in front of the TV. The game had ended. Phil had fallen asleep. The game was just running through its auto routine. The Pong system, just to keep from burning in an image on the TV, was just changing color, sitting there, pretending to play itself. And I was just sitting there. I wondered, had no one heard the scream? What happened? Where did the last few minutes go? Then I noticed it was getting light outside, and Phil waking up, we both realized we had lost several hours. Several hours that had started with a scream that no one had heard. Bud was still dead, still laying over there on the inflatable mattress, and didn't look to have moved any. I had one thought. I said, Phil, the death head, the gold, it's in the root cellar. I know it. I know it's there. There's a root, a long, pointed root. The death head's pointing at the gold. It's in the root cellar, just under the stairs of the front corner. It's like the death head's reaching for it. We both ran without explanation and grabbed shovels. We jumped on a four-wheeler, and me riding on the back, we rode up the street to Bud's house and up to the death head and then over to the root cellar. We were delirious from all the night's experiences, but also delirious with gold fever and dreams of riches. We had grown up thinking about Bud's tales of gold, and now we'd found it. We knew we'd found it. We dug quickly. Not too long after, we hit something hard. It was thick wood, just a foot or so below the earth at the base of the steps. Phil ran for an axe, and I kept pounding at them boards with that shovel, trying to break through. I was making progress when Phil ran down with the axe, and he started to crash through it with that axe hard. Them old slats hitting it. In an instant, it fell through, and all these gold fell out. Just hundreds of little nuggets, like a wave of nuggets, just been pinned up behind these boards. We dug through them, and we just mad dreams of wealth, just laughing. And a bunch of my relatives have shown up at this point, and Uncle Dwayne had a real good laugh holding up a piece of that pyrite to the light of the sun. Fool's gold, boys. It's worth a little more than regular rock. If you can find somebody that wants to buy a rock. It sure looked like gold, or what I imagined gold would look like. It still good to get the rest of it. We still thought it was awful neat rocks, and we cleared it out. We filled up a couple dozen 5-gallon buckets with the little pieces of pyrite, all looking like tiny specks of glitter in it. Wayne brought down a light to help us finish up cleaning out the cellar. It was only, with the light that we saw this twisted mass of root that had invaded that space that had been filled with the pyrite. The root looked like a couple clutching each other in a loving embrace. The roots of the death head had found their way down to the fool's gold and formed a giant cancer-like growth in the form of two lovers embracing. Dwayne, Jerry, and Randy, they ran to get some chainsaws, and we cut that knot out and were able to drag it out of the root cellar, just busting the door a bit. We got it out into the root of the day and into the light of the day, and we We were all marveling at that root and how much it really couldn't be more possible for something to be more disturbing than the death head itself, but I'd be damned if this root wasn't more disturbing. The cancerous growth of a tree root just sat there disturbing us. Obviously, it was Bud's grandfather and his grandmother, dead and gone long ago, but present, reborn in the form of this deformed tree root, of a tree that wouldn't die, had been dead as long as anyone remembered. It was crazy how much it looked like two people. We were thinking about setting it up in the house or maybe hanging it somewhere. In fact, no one could decide what to do with it. No one really wanted it. We decided to burn it. So we soaked it in gas and a little bit of diesel and lit it aflame. And it was fun just sitting there watching it burn. I think it made us all feel a little better about Bud's death. We were laughing about how crazy he had been and how he always bragged about that secret gold he had. Uncle Bud, you were nuts.